Christopher Nolan rips HBO Max as worst streaming service, denouncing the Warner Brothers plan. The Warner Brothers plan, as you probably heard by now, we've done this story before, is they're going to take all of their 17 big tentpole movies that they plan on releasing in 2001 and release them on HBO Max, their streaming service, which, as you know, they should rename to HBO Plus. And they're going to release it simultaneously on their streaming service at the same time as they're putting them in theaters. But like we were actually just talking about yesterday, a lot of people were not notified of this. And that's really shocking. It's one thing when Warner Media's DC Comics division doesn't say anything to the DC Comics retailers about changing their distributors. And they're just like, hey, guess what? We're changing on distributors tomorrow. That's not good business. They shouldn't really do that. But at the same point, they're kind of abandoning the industry. They've supported retailers for a really long time. I don't know. If it was me, I would have done it with more communication, because when you don't communicate, everything just costs more. It's a bigger problem. But Warner Media actually did this with all these major movie producers and all this major directing talent. And it's not like they even fund all their own movies. There's a big dispute they have now with Legendary, that film company. And we'll get into that story too, because it's a pretty interesting story. So let's get in there. To many insiders, Warner Media's blindsiding of talent and their reps with the news that it would send its 17 films directly to HBO Max in 2021 felt like an insult. It really was an insult. Speaking of which, you don't insult me. Subscribe to the channel. Click the bell for notifications so I can get you these awesome stories. For many in the movie business, producers, directors, stars, and their representatives, December 3rd, 2020 is a day that will live in infamy. That's not an appropriate thing to say, but let's move on. Some of our industry filmmakers and most important movie stars went to bed the night before thinking they were working for the greatest movie studio and woke up to find out they were working for the worst streaming service. Filmmaker Christopher Nolan, whose relationship with Warner's dates back to Insomnia in 2002, said in a statement to Hollywood Reporter, "That's pretty hardcore. Thinking they were working for the greatest movie studio and waking up to find out they were working for the worst streaming service." And that is kind of a big deal because, you can do direct to video, you can do direct to TV, you can do direct to streaming movies. Some of the direct to streaming movies have been bigger budget movies. They've been real movies, $200 million movies with some stars and things like that, but they're not really established. They're not established in the same way as obviously big budget movies are that are heavily marketed. It's very, very high end, very fancy schmancy to have your films released through movie theaters. That's the way it's always been done. That's the biggest of big platforms. And all of a sudden, all these filmmakers now who've been working with Warner's because of this deal with HBO Max, they're working for HBO Max. They never agreed to that. I would not work for HBO Max unless they at least change their name to HBO Plus. Added Nolan. Warner Brothers had an incredible machine for getting a filmmaker's work out everywhere, both in theaters and in the home, and they are dismantling it as we speak. They don't even understand what they're losing. The decision makes no economic sense, and even the most casual Wall Street investor can see the difference between disruption and dysfunction. Well, I mean, look, he's made a lot of big movies. You can't say that Chris Nolan's not a great director. He obviously understands movie distribution. He understands marketing. But as far as it being a good business decision and knowing what Wall Street wants, there's no chance in the world that Elliott Management, that their finance guys didn't look at this deal and say, yeah, screw the movie industry. Do what you want to do. Take all the credibility of the movie industry and push it into your streaming service. Why? Because the streaming service is what they're trying to do to actually make money now. They kind of need to. They kind of need to do that. Hey, Mighty Joe, good to see you. Shadowhawk, great to see you. Great to see you, Leg Kick. What is shaking, Leg Kick? Who you kicking now, leg kick? All right. On that now infamous morning, Ann Sarnoff, whose ungainly, that's nice vocabulary, ungainly title is chair and CEO of Warner Media Studios and Networks Group, and Warner Brothers Film Studio chairman Toby Emmerich called the heads of the major agencies to drop a bombshell. Warner's was about to smash the theatrical window, sweeping its entire 17-picture 2021 slate onto its faltering HBO Max streaming service, debuting them on the same day they would open in whatever theaters could admit customers. Surprisingly, to some of the industry, sources say the idea was the brainchild of Warner Brothers COO Carolyn Blackwood, who, looking at a relatively weak 2021 slate, saw an opportunity to avoid the humiliation of potentially bad grosses while currying favor with the streamer-obsessed higher-ups. So you got to keep in mind, too, like from the perspective of who's writing this article, they're not with the streaming services. These are not technology people. Hollywood Reporter is all about, the existing Hollywood industry, all the non-technology people. My take is it is offensive to the creators of the movies, the producers, the directors, the writers, all the actors, everyone who works so hard to actually make the movies, to go ahead and just say, you know what, we're going to dump this on HBO Max without communicating with them privately. Although if you communicated with them privately, obviously that word would get out. So, but still, there's an obligation to communicate with people. And they could make the argument that, look, we don't have a business. We're trying to build a streaming business, but there's no studio business. We got to do this. I don't know. They didn't communicate. That was Warner Media's biggest problem here. The instant response in Hollywood was outrage and a massive girding for battle. Warner's has made a grave mistake, says one top talent agent. Never have this many people been this upset with one entity. Like others, he had spent much of the day dealing with calls from stunned and angry clients. Guess what? What? You're on HBO Max. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Those kinds of calls. And that swooshing sound you hear, it's the lawyers stropping their blades as they prepare for battle. That Warner's was self-dealing in shifting these movies to its own streamer, perhaps, or that the company acted in bad faith. Well, no, they didn't. They just should have communicated. Some talent reps say the decision affects not only profit participants, which it does, which is to say, if you put the movie on streaming, that's fine, but we're going to sell less movie tickets, which means there'll be less profit that come from theaters, less revenue from theaters. So that will affect profit sharing. But, I mean, how do you even say that when there's COVID, right? I don't know. Harry Lime says, I like HBO Max. I've had it since day one. It's a great selection of new and old. Well, cool. Very cool. Mighty Joe is saying, isn't Toby Emmerich a small bit actor? No, I think he was a producer. I don't really know his whole background. That's interesting feedback on HBO Max. Yeah, I mean, give it some time with HBO Max. They're going to probably have sign-up deals, too, like after January 1st, where they'll give you some free stuff. All right. Some talent reps say the decision affects not only profit participants, but others who have also worked on films, as the movie rights might affect residual payments. They absolutely will affect residual payments. And that is why you have agents and managers and pay them huge percentages, because this kind of stuff is not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen that it's a complete shock to everybody. So that's really the fault of the relationships at the agencies and the managers, and you could probably see a lot of people changing that. Although, who the hell knows? It sounds like Warner Media didn't tell anybody. They expect and hope that the guilds will get involved. So they're talking about Writing Guilds of America and other producing guilds. And these are associations that will help sue as a group. The Warner's move poses big, maybe even existential questions. How do theaters survive this supposedly one-time, excused by the pandemic move? Genies are hard to put back in the bottle. And no one... I've had genies I've tried. I'm still trying to put back in the bottle. I don't recommend taking your genie out of any bottles, guys. Don't do it unless you're ready to have your genie completely forever out of the bottle. And no one believes Warner's intended this to be temporary anyway. Yeah, I don't. What damage will be done to exhibitors by training customers that if they sit on their sofas, the biggest movies will come? And will Warner's face serious backlash from important producers, filmmakers, guilds, and on-screen talent? Warner's was the quintessentially talent-friendly, filmmaker-friendly studio, says one agent. Now Warner's isn't the first place, second place, or third place you'd want to go. Because the thing is, when you have projects and you're looking for like, well, I want the best economic deal, I want the best creative deal where they'll give me control, where I see they're going to have a certain amount of budget, and then you understand that they'll actually spend money to market it. You've even heard that like with comics. You know, you want to go work, if you're doing a creator-owned title and you're going to a publisher, this doesn't exist anymore. But back in the day, people might go to one publisher over another to publish a project because they know that one publisher is going to bother to promote it and it's going to have a chance. But the same thing goes for making these movies. And also with making movies, you know, it could take 10 years to get a movie made. So if it takes 10 years to get a movie made and then at the end, the distribution falls out, it's like, well, nah, we're not really going to distribute it. We're just going to stick it on our streaming service. That's a big deal. That's people's, investing their whole life in it. Many in Hollywood think that Warner Media opted for this drastic move to play to streaming infatuated Wall Street and redo the botched launch of HBO Max, which has netted a dismal 8.6 million activated subscribers so far. But one prominent agent notes that the top executives at Warner Media and its parent, at&t CEO, the unfortunately named John Stankey, Warner Media CEO Jason Kilar, and of course Sarnoff don't understand the movie business and they don't understand talent relations. The movie business is a terrible business. I mean, unfortunately, especially now. So they understand that it's terrible, and they understand that streaming is a good business if you can get people to sign up. 8.6 million subscribers is not really good. It's honestly not good. But this could help them get another 10 or 20. Who knows? While Kilar pays what it seems as lip service to movies, that's the CEO of HBO Max. He runs HBO Max. And actually, Warner Media. He runs all of Warner Media, Jason Kilar. And he founded Hulu. So they're lucky to have that guy. So while Kilar plays what's seen as lip service to movies, industry veterans say Warner's is sacrificing the huge profit that comes from selling movies in multiple formats and on multiple platforms around the world. Even before Warner's made its play, there was grumbling amongst agents that Sarnoff, who had been on the job for more than a year, had to get acquainted with key players on the film side or make much of an impression at all. That's why many are focusing their wrath on Emmerich. Toby's passion is only about managing up, says one agent who represents major Warner talent. By the weekend, following the announcement, Emmerich was calling important filmmakers with projects set for 2022 to assure them that their movies wouldn't be dropped on the streaming service without warning. We just did it to you now, but don't worry about it. We're not going to do it to you for 2022. Yeah, really? What assurances can you give? As if anyone would believe he had any control over this situation, said one producer with a major Warner property. Toby probably had a really bad weekend. Not that I feel bad for him, says one agent. Yeah, he probably did. According to a source, Emmerich tried to soothe In the Heights director John Chu by pointing out that the movie was still getting a global theatrical release, but because they don't have HBO Max distributed internationally, it's really just the US. But industry insiders say the studio is pretending that pirates won't pounce as soon as these films are streaming on HBO Max, which, as you know, should be renamed HBO Plus. As soon as one does, there's an excellent version of the movie everywhere immediately, says one industry veteran. It is pretty amazing that they do a pretty good job of not having good quality bootlegs of new movies when they come out. Somehow they are kind of blocking them. Much of this outrage will surely be mitigated if Warner Media is prepared to write big checks to all the profit participants in the films that have been moved. Now, there's another article on this about this that actually talks about like they actually have written some very substantial checks. It's a critical time for them at the highest level to make this thing right with talent, says one rep. But agents say the guidance that's been provided so far suggests that the company isn't planning to offer what's now called Wonder Woman money. In the honor of the rich deal the studio gave profit participants in Wonder Woman 1984 when that film moved to HBO Max. So what they did, she looks great in her gold suit. Good for you, Gal Gadot. It's hard to meet chicks in gold outfits like that, but it's worth it. Put in the effort. Warner Media had to shovel tens of millions at Gal Gadot and other key players because the company wants a third in the series. But that sets the bar high. So what they're talking about is if Wonder Woman 1984 had traditional theatrical distribution, and if there weren't a pandemic, then they assumed that it would have made about $1 billion in box office. If it had made $1 billion in box office, Gal Gadot would have gotten something like a 30, 40, $50 million bonus. I haven't seen the specifics, but very substantial. Because they're going to stick it on HBO Max simultaneously with movie theaters, they basically made a deal with Gal Gadot and some of the other producers or whoever who were big shots and said, okay, we're going to give you just the bonus as if it made $1 billion. And here you go. Just they had to buy their way out of it. But they're not going to do that for everybody, apparently. Sources say even Suicide Squad director James Gunn, who is platform agnostic, was not pleased when the studio followed its shocking announcement by floating a lackluster formula for compensating him and other profit participants in the film. Remember when James Gunn got fired? And then he's like, oh, well, it's okay. I can work for Suicide Squad. Like, well, there you go, buddy. You go work for Suicide Squad. This is what happens. This is why you need to be a billionaire. Make your own comics, make your own movies, do your own thing, and not have to rely on Warner Media. At minimum, Warner Media has opened its door to arduous negotiations with the major agencies over compensation from multiple profit participants in 17 movies. Did the Warner's numbers crunchers in projecting the cost of premiering the entire 2021 slate on HBO Max factor in the cost of widely anticipated legal challenges? I think they did. I think they said, yeah, we're just going to negotiate it out. We'll crunch it out. We'll just cram down some deals. Industry insiders believe Warner Media may have opened itself up to those, especially as it's selling the movies to its own streaming platform when none of the profit participants has a chance to figure out what Apple or Netflix might have paid for the opportunity to stream their projects day and date. Because if they were to stream them day and date on Apple or Netflix or whatever, they may have had a position to negotiate for that. But it's impossible to say that this didn't happen or get accelerated. Like, this is because of the pandemic. Warner Media, at least as far as I know, had nothing to do with the pandemic. Disney, I'm not so sure. Warner Media definitely had nothing to do with it. Because why do I say that? It's conspiratorial, but Bob Iger did kind of step down like a week or two before the pandemic got very hot. All of a sudden, he wasn't involved anymore. And now he's mentioned he'd be interested in being in a new administration if the presidency changes. That's recent. And they had so many dealings with China, Disney. So it's a little hard to trust those guys. Allegations of self-dealing are most sure to follow. Yeah, big deal. Many think Legendary will be the first to file a legal challenge. The company, Legendary, is the movie producer that made Dark Knight Returns and a few cool movies that finances a good portion of the movie. So they spend like 75% of the production budget, and they have a huge profit participation because of that. The company fired off a previous lawyer letter after Netflix offered something north of $225 million for the rights to Godzilla vs. Kong, which has seen its release date move from March 2020 to May 2021. Though Legendary financed 75% of the movie, Warner's had the power to block the sale, and it did. Legendary asked whether the studio would give it a deal to stream the movie on HBO Max and got no clear answer until its executives woke up one December morning to find that the movie was going day and date on the service without the benefit of a negotiation. So apparently Warner didn't agree with Legendary about Godzilla versus Kong, and they didn't even discuss it. And all of a sudden they're like, we're just going to stick it with all the rest of our movies on HBO Max. Good for them. I mean, I don't know. They really have to communicate. I mean, I think Warner Media needed to make this move. It was an absolute necessity, but they should have communicated with people better. Legendary's even more expensive picture, Dune, is getting the same treatment. The other companies that finance Warner movies, Village Roadshow and Braun, are also said to be aggrieved parties that might end up going to court. Whatever, sue them. What are you going to do? And then there's the talent Dune director. Yeah, then the talent. Dune director Denis Villeneuve is said to be among those who felt most strongly that a traditional big screen release was essential for his film. Chew, which along with Lin-Manuel Miranda, went through an intensive courtship with multiple suitors for In the Heights, and who had turned down a huge Netflix offer for Crazy Rich Asians because he cherishes the communal theatrical experience, told an associate he was shell-shocked after being informed of the Warner's decision. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of problems in the world right now. I do feel bad for these creative people, but it's like, look, they paid all the bills. They paid for all the production. No one has a lot of options with theatrical distribution. We all like the communal experience of going to the movies. It's fun. It's cool. It's interesting. You might meet a nice stranger at one of those movies sometimes. We all like to do that. But let's be realistic. You know, it's a freaking pandemic. People don't want to go to the movies right now. It's not Warner Media's fault. Sources say Warner Media insiders have been hoping that Disney will follow its lead and shift its slate to streaming. But Disney, which has had $7 billion grossing movies last year, isn't about to do that. No. Instead, it's moving some films to streaming, as it did with Hamilton and Artemis Fowl, likely Cruella and more. But an agent notes that the way Disney has handled the shift stands in stark contrast to what Warner's has done. They didn't do a unilateral thing, he said, adding that a studio executive has made preemptive calls to talent and their reps that help smooth the process. Disney, it's funny because Disney has always had a reputation for being like, hey, we don't pay well. Like Disney didn't pay well. They didn't pay the Marvel people well. They didn't pay well for their budgets. They always really super aggressively crunch their numbers. And now these guys are saying, oh, well, Disney was so nice to us. Basically, there are a lot of emotions involved, so you have to communicate. It's also worth noting that Disney Plus, which has dwarfed HBO Max in terms of subscribers, has gotten, boy, they really don't like HBO Max at, over here. They really don't. But Disney Plus had a great launch strategy. They used Verizon, and Verizon helped promote the hell out of them. And then they had one big hit with Mandalorian, and the rest was history. The pandemic helped them. Which has dwarfed HBO Max in terms of subscribers, has got a lot of mileage out of one original hit, The Mandalorian. Hey, I just said that. Which is based on an iconic movie property. Really? Which one? Star Wars? I guess. Did you guys know? I didn't know this. Last Jedi came on TV tonight. I started watching it for not even 5 minutes. And I looked at the info on it. I was curious what they rated it. It was rated 4 stars. They rated it 4 stars. Did other places rate The Last Jedi 4 stars? It's strange to me. There's never been a full-fledged franchise blockbuster launched on a streaming service. Well, streaming services are new, observes an executive at Warner's competitor. It starts with theaters and it starts with opening weekend. And so far, those blockbusters have been the ones that generated merchandise sales and theme park attractions. Okay. Warner's doesn't have theme parks, but it reaped a big benefits from movies that almost certainly would have dropped onto HBO Max had the option been available at the time. Consider last year's mega hit Joker. Film studio chief Emmerich was not a fan of the project. It was defended worldwide by worldwide marketing president Blair Rich, who was recently pushed out. Well, what are you going to do? Emmerich lowballed on the budget to discourage director Tom Phillips from making it, and when the filmmaker persisted, sold off half the movie. Yeah, half the rights were sold off for Joker, which means half the risk and half the profits. Joker then became a cultural phenomenon that grossed more than $1 billion worldwide and was honored with 11 Academy Award nominations and an Oscar for Joaquin Phoenix. Would any of that have happened had Joker been dropped onto HBO Max? I don't know. Probably not. But they had movie theaters back then. We kind of don't anymore. Despite their assertions to the contrary, many industry insiders believe that neither at&t chairman Stanky nor Killar has much interest in the legacy movie business. Killar has said this move was made for the fans and told CNBC, if we start our days and end our days focused on the customer, we're going to lead the industry. Yeah, Killar is not a movie guy. Killar is a streaming guy. So everything he thinks about is going to be in terms of streaming and how to get more people to feel like they need to engage with their streaming service. He's interesting, Jason Killar, and he used to work as a vice president under Jeff Bezos and directly with him at Amazon for a few years. And it's interesting to hear. He does a nice presentation, like a 10-minute thing for business school or whatever on YouTube. It's interesting to see people go through like their business strategy, what their focus is. But Killar really is focused on the customer. But the thing of it is that always becomes an excuse, right? Because you want to respect the customer, but you have to respect the creative people that help make the product. And you also have to respect your investors, and you have to respect your employees. So what Kill Art does is the same thing Amazon does, is they'll say, well, look, we need to always respect the customer. We want to give the customer the most options to enjoy our content as possible. The customer is always number one. So you can't argue with that because the customer is the consumer, the end user. But at the same time, you have to have some respect for the other people in the industry. And if you want to support my work, check out The Mermaids. It's my new full-color 48-page comic book. It's called The Mermaids. It's an epic mermaid fantasy. It's like Game of Thrones with mermaids. Full color. It's a new ongoing series. It's completely done. It's just available for pre-order on Indiegogo right now, and it's going to be shipping April 2021 wherever you are in the world. You can check out the link. You'll see there are color pages. You can see the color covers. You can see the making of book, which is another 100-page book. It shows you the full script to the mermaids and all the layouts or how he made the book in the first place. And additional character designs, tremendous amount of work that went into this one. And also you can see all the paragraphs of descriptions of all the characters. It's really an enormous project. So go ahead and check that out and link in the description below. And I will see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.